This is the Student Leadership News Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Student Leadership News Podcast. I'm Ronan and with me,
I'm Cameron.
And Cam is known as the Zac Efron of student leadership, pretty much. Is it true, Cameron, that at today's event, someone did say you look like Zac Efron?
Someone straight after dancing today while I still had a headband on from a little bit of sweat came up to me and just ran straight up and said, "Thank you for today's conference." And number two, you look like Zac Efron. And then just ran off before I could say a single thing. I was kind of stuck there just going, what?
Well, for those that are watching the video version of this podcast, perhaps you can comment below and say whether you think Cam does look like Zac Efron or not. Anyway, we're on the road, as that little conversation suggests. We've got conferences happening all over the place at the moment, working with student leaders everywhere. So we have brought the mobile studio with us, and we are in Goulburn, New South Wales, a little town just off the side of the Hume Highway. Tomorrow we are going to have like 350 student leaders in one room from a heap of different schools. I wanted to take some time out now to record this podcast.
We sure did. Now, it's going to be heaps of fun this episode. You've by now surely listened to episode number 1, but we thought we'd just update quickly where you can find this podcast if you want to look into the different areas. There's a video version, YouTube, Facebook, or you can listen to it on the audio. Now, Ronan, I think it's great if we just jump straight into the podcast.
Let's do it.
Let's jump into our first section, and that is Tour Tales.
Tour Tales.
Wonderful. First segment, Tour Tales. This is where we talk about something, we relive a memory of something that happened while we were on the road with different student leaders. Ronan, you've got a pretty funny tour tale for this week.
Yeah, it was a good memory, the last 24 hours. So we were on the plane from Brisbane. We arrived in Sydney. We got off the plane in Sydney, loaded the tour vans up, and we headed down towards Canberra to work with student leaders there. Now, on the way, often when we're driving around doing these events, it's tempting to stop at the service station and buy some junk food, stop at McDonald's. It's a habit we can get into. And so yesterday, we actually got distracted by some signs on the side of the road that were quite appealing because they were advertising fruit. And we thought, well, that's a healthy alternative. That sounds good. So we see the first sign that says, like, fruit stop up ahead. And we're like, well, that's a possibility, but McDonald's is still sounding better. The next sign says, like, mango special. We're like, well, mangoes are a good fruit on special. Maybe we should stop and get them. Then a third sign, a fourth sign, a fifth sign. Someone has taken a lot of time to put these signs up down the Hume Highway. And after about 10 signs, I just committed. I'm like, I don't know when this actual fruit stop is going to be, but we will pull the car over and I will buy a box of fruit from this person, whoever they are. Now, Cameron, you were trying to convince me that at 6:30 in the evening it was going to be closed, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
I thought, cool, I won't have to buy this box of fruit, but at least I was prepared to have a healthy snack. So anyway, we got to the end of these signs about 4 kilometres later, pull in to the bay off to the side of the highway, and there he is. The dude with the truck is still selling fruit.
Now, it wasn't just any truck, like a ute truck. It was a full-blown
It was
truck.
huge. Like, this guy is probably setting up one of the biggest commercial operations between Sydney and Melbourne on the side of the road.
It was massive.
Yeah. And I'd committed. I just said to people in the car, I will buy a box of fruit, whatever that is. Anyway, so I got out of the car, walked over to the guy expecting a $5 special or a $10 special or whatever it might be. Anyway, the fruit looked good, but the fruit was $35 for a box of fruit, wasn't it? Anyway, I got out the credit card, I paid $35 for the box of fruit, went back in the car excited that everybody would be able to eat the fruit with me, and some people did, but I must point out, Cameron, how much of the fruit did you eat?
I did not touch any of the fruit.
Why do you not eat fruit, Cameron?
Pure ignorance for my health.
Okay, well, we ate fruit the whole way to Canberra. I had it for breakfast this morning. At our event, I didn't have any lunch. I only ate fruit again. Other people did too. On the way back home, or the way back up the highway towards where we are in Goulburn now, ate more fruit again. And even though we've been eating this fruit, this is the benefit of watching the podcast on video. Okay, for people who are watching on video, I'm about to reach down and grab the fruit box.
I mean, Ronan, I've seen the fruit box, and
it still looks full, doesn't it? There are still mangoes, apricots, multiple things of strawberries, 15 apples, a plum there, a nectarine.
So much fruit.
So much fruit. And we have been eating fruit for 24 hours nonstop. When I say we, it's me and the healthier members of the team. And you have been ignorant of your fruit responsibility.
I just love, you were telling me that because we sat in the car while you were getting your fruit, you jumped out and you were talking to the guy, and we've ended up with a lot of strawberries. How did this happen, Ronan?
Okay, this bit makes me look foolish. I was hoping you weren't going to go there. When he said $35, because in my mind I had committed to the fruit, I just said yes, and I paid for it. On later reflection, I think that he was expecting me to barter him down, and that people normally only pay $15 or $20 for the box of fruit, because as soon as I just said yes and paid for $35, okay, all of a sudden there was a look of surprise on his face, and he pulled out some extra strawberries and said, "Extra strawberries for you." So I think that's him feeling bad that I said yes to $35 when perhaps that was not what it was worth. Anyway, health is priceless, Cameron.
Yes.
Health is priceless.
Yes.
I encourage you to eat more fruit.
Thank you.
And whatever's left over of this fruit box, if you comment accordingly, we will send you a piece of fruit. We probably won't do that, but that would be fun.
It would be fun. It was like how I bet my phone to a kid on stage today.
True, we're playing a game, and you told him if he gets a score of 17 in the game, that you would give him your telephone.
Which is impossible because I set up part of the game, and
there's
I
only like 10 rounds in the game.
So it's physically impossible, but it was still an option there.
Anyway, so that's this week's tour tale, like box of fruit on the highway between Sydney and Canberra.
There we go. What a great tour tale to start off this podcast. Let's jump straight on to our next segment, which is BLT.
BLT, Best Leadership Tip.
Okay, so I love this segment, BLT, Best Leadership Tip. I like it because I like food, as the fruit story suggests, but best leadership tip, throwing over to you for this one in this episode, Cam.
Well, I thought a great leadership tip, probably the best leadership tip at the moment, is creating a plan to follow. Now, if at this time so far in the year, a leadership team does not have a plan to follow, it can almost be a little daunting the rest of the year. Yeah. Now, a plan doesn't have to be this crazy document that outlines every single idea you've ever heard in your life that you've gotten off Pinterest. It doesn't have to be that at all. Yeah. I think a plan is even better if it's simple. I like to think of a plan as a one-page document that outlines what's going to be successful, what's going to make your team or yourself successful. And the reason I think a plan is so important, and the tip for this episode, is because when you have a plan, you know what you're moving towards, you know what you need to achieve as a team, and it also gives you something that you can aim to complete by a date, or it outlines what is going to make your team actually effective. Now, we see this all the time, and why would you think, Ronan, the team plan or having a plan in general is the most important leadership tip?
I think it's so important because it gives something for a team to continually review against. I'm glad you said that, like a plan should be one page, because, could it be less, could it be more, of course, but I think too often teams are at different ends of the scale. Student leadership team says, yeah, we've got a plan, but all they've got is an idea or a goal. Now, that's fine, no problem with that, but it needs to have more to it, some steps that you're going to follow, some certain dates, or breaking it down into certain steps. Often student leaders don't do that, okay? They just have an idea and they call it a plan. That's not a plan. And then sometimes they've got such a complex plan that it is, like you said, a big folder full of information. You call it a plan, but it's too hard to digest. No one uses that much information, and so it gets ignored. So I just think it's so important that a team has one page of steps they're going to follow to achieve something. That's so important.
Exactly right. Now, that's really important. That's the best leadership tip
for
this episode. But let's jump on to our next segment, which is top 3.
3, 2, 1.
Top 3.
Okay, top 3 for this episode, Ronan. Top 3 ways to be a good role model. Go with number 1.
Okay, number 1 is to know and show your school values.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about values, it's probably a set of words that are important to a particular school. Depending on the background of the school, the culture of the school, these words are going to be different. Now, they may come from a mission statement. They may live on a special picture board in the school or somewhere in the school office, something that the school has decided is important. So for a student leader, you need to know what those things are, and then you need to show those particular values. So, for example, a school might say that being welcoming is important. Okay, a school might say that excellence is important. A school might say that sharing is important. Whatever these values could be for a particular school, You need to know them as a student leader, and then you need to actively show them. And if you're showing them, then you're one step closer to being a good role model. So that's number one. You go for number two.
Okay, so number two is build relationships with younger students. Now, sometimes all the great things that leaders do throughout the year can be lost because there's no one really even watching or following them. And the reason building relationships with younger students is so important is not only does it show the rest of the school what you were doing, but it also leaves this kind of legacy, leaves behind what you achieved throughout the year. Building relationships also means that in future years, maybe when they get to a leadership role, they can talk to you or they can look back to the things that you did as maybe ideas, or it can even be, hey, this leader actually made an influence on me back when I was in a younger grade, and now I should do the same thing to younger students. Maybe I should be a role model to younger students and demonstrate, like number one, the like our school values. So yeah, that's number two, build relationships with younger students.
Yeah, totally. There's no way that you can have an influence on someone if they don't know you, if they're not even looking towards you.
Yep.
So if you're an older student, you might think that you're doing all the right things and that you're doing a great job as a role model. But that's good for you, but it doesn't affect anybody else unless they're actually looking towards you. That's why I'm so glad you talked about building relationships.
Excellent. So number three, Ronan, what is it?
Is to do things with excellence. Now, when we talk about excellence, we just mean doing things really well. So it means trying to be the best student you can be and letting that be something that inspires other people. It means when you put your hand up to participate in a particular activity, doing it to your best and allowing people to see you really care about what you're doing and that you do it really well. If you're organising an event as a student leader or as part of a team, that you just do it in such a way that people find it inspirational, the effort that you're putting in. When you do things with excellence, people take notice. I think people take notice of excellence because nowadays people like to take a lot of shortcuts, okay? So they'll notice people who do things with excellence. So if you as a student are doing things to your absolute very best, it rubs off on other people and you become a role model to them. So there you go. That's our third way to be a good role model for this episode.
Wonderful. Let's jump on to our next segment. Top three is always great fun, but let's talk about some questions that we hear from students now. Let's jump into question time.
Question time.
Question time, Ronan, one of my favourite times. You know, we love talking about leadership, but even more than that, I love hearing different questions that leaders face, maybe different things they're facing at their school. Now, this question comes from a student leader at Highfields State College. And the question is, we are a new school. How do we create a great school culture? So how do they do it? A young school, how do they start off well, create that great school culture that a lot of schools long for?
Okay, first thing. Talk about school culture. We're talking about the way things are done, the feeling around the school. Sometimes schools that are new feel like they're missing out because schools that have been around forever have already got their school culture. I would say to these student leaders at Highfields and any student leaders out there at a new school, you are very fortunate because you get the chance to create a great school culture. Not every school has everything about their culture correct in the way they want. In fact, so many schools are trying to change and improve things about their school culture. So if you're a new school, then you've got the opportunity right from the beginning. It's very, very exciting that you get to create a great school culture. The first thing I'd probably say is in relation to school values. We talked about that earlier in the podcast. But what you could do as a student leadership team is make your school values fun. Make sure values aren't just something that sit on a wall in the office as part of a mission statement or a picture board, okay? Make sure that values are something that are exciting, that your values come out in the events that you do, that your values come out in the speeches that you have, that your values are everyday part of the conversation at your school, that the values come alive. So you want to make sure the values come alive. The second thing is that any time something takes place that you don't want in the school culture, try as quickly as possible to fix it. Not to make a big deal, not our job to get angry at everybody, but when you notice something that's not part of the school culture that you want to create, you deal with it. And once you do that, you start to shape as quickly as possible the kind of school culture that you actually want. So anyway, I get excited talking about school culture because it is so important. If you can get a really positive and healthy school culture, then your school really becomes a great place for people to hang out. So I don't know, hopefully that helps the students at Highfields.
Yeah, they're two great tips that you just gave them on how they can create their great school culture. Now, Ronan, let's jump into our last segment of this podcast. 1 minute wisdom straight from the National Young Leaders Day.
So, yep, it'll bring this one to a close. We'll close the episode with this. We're going to have 1 minute wisdom from Adam Goods, who spoke at the Sydney National Young Leaders Day for secondary students. So, As the podcast concludes, you'll hear from Adam Goods, but from us, we want to thank you for being part of this podcast with us, and we certainly hope you can join us for the next episode as we go on this journey together.
We sure do. Now, remember that you can check us out on anywhere that you can find audio. You can see us on Facebook or YouTube. Just search Student Leadership News, and you'll be able to find those different platforms. And we'll see you in the next episode. Or hear you, or you'll hear us.
That's it from us, and we'll leave you with Adam Goods from the National Young Leaders Day.
1 Minute Wisdom, direct from the National Young Leaders Day.
When you want something, you can't just hope that you're going to get it. By having that plan, like John spoke about, that direction, that purpose, that thing that gives you strength by having those goals, kept me so focused on what the end goal was. And that was to be voted in to that leadership group. Comes a heavy role with leadership, because once you're in there, you've got to live up to those standards. Just like you do for your schools, you have core values. You're here because you are young leaders. People see something in you, in your characteristics, in what you say, but most importantly, in what you do.
Thanks for listening to the Student Leadership News Podcast. Interact with us on social media and follow the news online at studentleadership.news.